He had been walking the same corridors for years, a quiet figure in the grand hall that seemed to belong to everyone else but him. The polished floors reflected the chandeliers above, and the smell of polished wood mixed with the faint scent of old music sheets filled the air. Every evening, as the musicians rehearsed and the audience arrived, he moved unnoticed, pushing a broom or carrying a mop, his hands rough from hard work. He liked the order, the rhythm of cleaning. It gave him time to think, to remember the music he loved. But today was different. Today, someone had spoken directly to him, someone who didn't usually notice him. "Clean the stage before the evening show," the stage manager had said without looking up from her clipboard. There was no tone, no hint that it was anything more than a simple instruction, but for him it felt heavier than usual. He nodded, as he always did, and wheeled the broom to the stage. The wood felt cold under his feet, and he could hear the faint echo of the footsteps of the orchestra rehearsing above him. The notes drifted down, soft but clear, and he found himself pausing, letting the broom rest against the floor, listening. There was a violin playing a slow, lingering melody, a cello answering it with a low, steady hum, and above all, the soft whisper of the piano. He knew those notes. They had been part of his life even before he was allowed near a real piano. He moved slowly, letting the rhythm of the music guide him. Every sweep of the broom matched a note in his mind, and for a moment, he imagined himself not on the floor cleaning, but on the stage performing. The thought made him smile, small and secret. He had played in silence before, in empty rooms, in corners of his home where no one could hear him. The piano had been his refuge, his voice, even when words failed him. But out here, in the grand hall, he was invisible, a shadow moving along the edges of brilliance. The stage was large, bigger than any he had cleaned before. The wood panels were polished to a shine, and he could see his reflection faintly as he moved. He worked methodically, dusting every corner, checking every edge. His hands moved automatically, but his mind wandered to the music above. Each instrument spoke to him differently. The violin reminded him of longing, of dreams he had not yet reached. The cello spoke of patience and perseverance. But it was the piano that pulled at him most, each chord a tug at the corners of his heart. He wondered how it would feel to press the keys in front of an audience, to let the music pour out, unguarded and true. He remembered the first time he had touched a piano. It had been an old upright in a dusty room, the keys yellowed with age, some sticking, some chipped, but the sound had been magic. Even then, he had known it could speak in ways words never could. He had practiced quietly, learning every note by memory, letting the music live in his fingers. There were no teachers, no lessons, just a hunger to create, to express something that seemed bigger than himself. And though the world rarely gave him attention, the piano had always listened, always understood. Sweeping the stage now, he felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. The instruments above him were being played by skilled hands, musicians trained to perfection, while he had only his imagination and his practice. But there was something in him that refused to stay hidden. He had dreams, and sometimes, even the smallest chance to step closer to them made his heart race. A small audience had begun to gather, though they didn't know he existed. Staff moved quietly, preparing the hall, arranging chairs, checking lights. He saw the conductor moving across the stage, baton in hand, signaling to the musicians. He paused, listening to the piano again. Each note seemed to call to him, reminding him of all the hours he had spent practicing alone, of the nights when he would close his eyes and imagine applause that never came. He smiled to himself, imagining that someone, somewhere, could hear the music he carried inside. As he continued, he noticed a small scratch on the stage floor, a mark left by a previous performance. He knelt to examine it, brushing away dust with his fingers. His mind drifted to thoughts of the musicians above him, each of them working hard, perfecting every note. He knew that talent alone was not enough. Discipline and dedication were necessary, and he had that even if no one had seen it yet. He could feel the rhythm of the music in his hands as he cleaned, moving in time with the notes as if the broom were an extension of his own body. Each sweep became a silent accompaniment to the melodies above. Time passed differently when he was on the stage. He lost track of minutes and hours, existing only in the sound and the movement. Sometimes, a note would resonate so strongly that he would stop entirely, listening with closed eyes, imagining his own fingers on the keys. Other times, he would hum softly, letting the music flow through him in a way that no one else could see. The work of cleaning became almost meditative, a bridge between the life he lived and the life he dreamed of. The stage manager returned, clipboard in hand, watching him work silently. She did not speak at first, just observed, as if sensing that this was more than ordinary cleaning. He noticed her presence but did not stop. His movements were steady, practiced, precise. Yet inside, his heart beat faster, anticipation and fear mingling. He was aware that tonight was not just another night of chores, not just another routine. Something was shifting, though he did not yet understand what. A sudden pause in the music above caught his attention. The pianist had stopped mid-note, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. He held his breath, unsure if it was a mistake or a cue. Slowly, the music resumed, and he felt a thrill run through him. He imagined himself there, at the piano, fingers flying over the keys, each note clear and deliberate. The thought made his hands tingle, even as he held the broom. He was ready, in that moment, for something he had not dared to hope for before. Minutes stretched, the stage slowly becoming spotless, each corner gleaming under the lights. He paused to admire his work, satisfaction mingling with longing. The hall was alive with music, with movement, with anticipation, and he felt more strongly than ever that he was part of it, even if the world had yet to notice. The air seemed charged with possibility, as if the stage itself were waiting for him to step forward. He straightened, brushing his hands on his pants, and looked out at the empty chairs, the grand piano in the center of the stage. It seemed to beckon him, its polished keys gleaming in the soft light. He knew the moment might never come, or that it might come suddenly, without warning. But he was ready. He had waited long enough, practiced silently, dreamed endlessly. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that tonight, something could change. The stage was clean. The music above was swelling, reaching crescendos, echoing through the hall. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. The broom felt heavy for a moment, then light, as if it were a bridge between who he was and who he wanted to be. His heart pounded in rhythm with the music, anticipation building with every note. He had no audience yet, no applause, no recognition. Only the music, only the stage, and his own determination. And in that quiet, fleeting moment, he felt the first spark of what was possible. The world might see him as just a cleaner, just a background figure, but he knew something they did not. He had music inside him, music that could not be ignored forever. The first act of his story was not about performance or fame, but about being ready, about holding on to his passion no matter how small his role seemed. The stage was his canvas, and he was prepared to paint with sound. As the lights dimmed slightly and the orchestra prepared to perform in earnest, he took one last look around the spotless stage. Each polished corner, each gleaming panel, felt like a promise. He moved to the piano, just a step closer than before, letting his fingers brush the keys lightly, almost as if testing the waters. The sound was familiar, comforting, like an old friend greeting him after years apart. And in that sound, he felt hope. He felt possibility. He felt the quiet beginning of something unforgettable that he had never imagined, that a simple evening of cleaning could become so charged with possibility. The polished keys of the grand piano called to him quietly, as if they could sense the longing that had lived inside him for years. He hesitated for a moment, looking around to make sure no one was watching too closely. The stage was still mostly empty, the chairs waiting for the audience, and the musicians were busy with their final adjustments. He stepped closer, his heart beating fast, a mix of fear and excitement making his hands tremble slightly. He lifted the cover of the piano and let his fingers hover above the keys. The smooth ivory felt cold under his touch. Memories of all the hours he had practiced on worn instruments, alone in dim rooms, flooded his mind. He had dreamed of this moment countless times, imagining the applause, imagining people listening and understanding. But now that he was actually there, in front of a real audience yet unseen, it felt different. Felt real and terrifyingly possible. He pressed a key softly, letting a single note resonate through the empty hall. The sound was pure and clear, echoing against the walls. His confidence began to grow, note by note, and soon he was playing a simple melody, one that he had composed in his head long ago. The broom he had been holding earlier now rested against the side of the stage, forgotten, as his hands moved naturally over the keys. It was as if the piano knew him, remembered all the times he had imagined playing in secret. The music drew his attention upwards. From the backstage balcony, he saw a few musicians stopping their practice to listen. Their eyes widened slightly, and whispers passed between them. He felt a thrill he had never felt before. He was invisible for so long, yet here, in this moment, he was seen not by everyone yet, but by enough to know that his playing had an effect. He let himself be carried by the sound, playing more confidently now, letting the music tell the story he had carried in his heart. His hands moved faster, the melody growing in complexity and emotion. He had learned to control each note, to express sadness, joy, longing, and hope through the touch of his fingers. The hall seemed to respond, the sound bouncing off the walls in waves that filled every empty corner. He imagined the audience filling the seats, listening, feeling the music as he did. His nerves were replaced with a rush of exhilaration. The piano had become a friend and a voice, speaking for him in ways words never could. From above, the conductor had stopped pacing and was watching intently. The pause in the musician's practice had created a quiet that made every note he played even more pronounced. He did not notice the attention at first, lost in his music, until a small, encouraging nod from one of the violinists made him glance up. Their expressions were a mix of surprise and admiration. It was the first time he had been recognized for something he had always known he could do. His fingers didn't slow, they only grew more certain. The piano keys guided him, and he let his emotions flow freely into the melody. Each chord told a story. He remembered the lonely evenings spent practicing in abandoned rooms, the times he had imagined applause that never came, the moments when he had felt invisible even to those closest to him. Every note was infused with that history, that longing to be seen and appreciated. And in that emptiness of the hall, with the lights reflecting softly on the polished wood, his story was being heard, if only by a few for now. He moved into a faster piece, one that required precision and control. His fingers flew over the keys with skill born from years of silent dedication. There was no rehearsal, no expectation other than his own, and yet he played with a confidence that surprised even him. Each melody intertwined with emotion, his hands translating thought into sound, feeling into rhythm. The hall vibrated with music, and even the shadows seemed to lean closer, listening. He felt a connection, not just to the instrument, but to the place, to the history of the stage he had cleaned countless times, unaware that one day it could become his platform. A few audience members had begun to trickle in, curious about the unusual silence broken only by the sound of the piano. Some paused at the doors, mesmerized, unsure if they were allowed to enter during rehearsal. Their presence made him aware of every movement, every note, but it did not stop him. Instead, it gave him energy, a subtle courage that made his fingers strike with clarity and intent. He imagined performing for hundreds someday, the same passion amplified, but for now, the few who were watching were enough. He continued to play, letting the music evolve naturally. He added crescendos, the notes rising and falling like waves, each chord expressing something deeper than words. He imagined the audience responding, imagining faces filled with emotion, the same emotion he felt while playing. The piano spoke for him, told his story of patience, practice, and hidden talent. It was his first real taste of sharing himself openly, and it exhilarated him. The conductor had now stepped forward, curiosity and surprise written across his face. He stopped a few feet away, observing the janitor-turned-pianist. He was clearly impressed, but also cautious, unsure if this was part of the plan or an unexpected intrusion. He did not interrupt. Instead, he allowed the music to continue, letting it unfold naturally, giving space for what seemed destined to happen. The young man did not falter. He played with every ounce of concentration and emotion he could muster. He remembered the countless nights he had played alone, imagining someone would one day listen, imagine someone would care. That imagination had been his companion, his motivator. And now, the reality of a few people witnessing his talent was overwhelming. He let the music fill him, fill the stage, and spill outward. The hall vibrated with every note, and for the first time, he felt that he was truly a part of this world he had always watched from the sidelines. Each note was deliberate, yet flowing, like a conversation. He was not just performing, he was speaking his life through sound. Every chord echoed his journey, his quiet determination, the hours spent hidden in the shadows of greatness. He had worked in silence, cleaning floors and mopping stages, never asking for recognition, always pushing forward quietly. And now, for the first time, someone was listening, truly listening, to the music he carried within. The melody slowed, and he shifted into a softer, more introspective section. The music was gentle, almost fragile, reflecting the vulnerability he felt in exposing himself. He thought of all the times he had been overlooked, the people who walked past without noticing him, the nights when no one believed in his potential. Each note was a whisper of hope, a declaration that even someone unnoticed could hold something extraordinary within. The quiet made the notes stand out, every key pressed with intention, every sound a story. A few musicians had now gathered near the stage, unable to resist listening. They whispered among themselves, sharing looks of awe. The pianist above, so often the center of attention, had suddenly become part of the backdrop to a revelation on the stage below. It was unexpected, a surprise born of talent and passion. He remained unaware of most of this, focused entirely on the music and the emotions it carried. He was performing not for recognition, not for applause, but because it was the only way to express what had been held inside for so long. The final notes lingered, hanging in the air, soft and resonant. He let his hands rest gently on the keys, feeling the vibration fade but the impact remain. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with anticipation, with wonder. Those who had been watching were silent, absorbing what they had just witnessed, unsure how to respond. The music had touched them, even in its brief performance, even without the grandeur of an audience. It was pure and honest, and that honesty was powerful. He looked up, seeing the conductor approaching, the few musicians around him still in awe. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the release of emotion, from the thrill of finally letting the music out. He had stepped closer to his dreams, closer than he ever had before. The music had been his guide, and now it had led him to a moment he could never forget. The stage, once just a place to clean, had become a bridge to possibility, a space where passion met opportunity, where quiet dedication was finally seen. He had taken the first step toward something unforgettable, and he knew it would change everything. The young man sat back from the piano, letting the last note fade into the quiet of the hall. His chest was heaving, not from exhaustion, but from the sudden rush of adrenaline and emotion. For the first time in his life, he felt that the music he had carried silently for so long was alive in a way that others could perceive. He looked around and saw the conductor stepping closer, his expression one of curiosity and surprise. The musicians who had been quietly observing whispered to one another, exchanging astonished glances. He felt exposed, vulnerable, but also exhilarated, as if a door he had never dared to approach had just swung wide open. The conductor stopped a few feet away, his eyes fixed on him, and finally spoke. Would you play a full piece for us?" There was hesitation in the words, a mixture of disbelief and genuine interest. The young man's heart skipped a beat. He had never performed in front of trained musicians or a live audience, not even once. All his life, His piano had been a private sanctuary. The thought of playing a complete piece, in front of people who were skilled and critical, made his stomach twist. But he knew he could not refuse. This was the chance he had been waiting for, the moment where all his silent practice could meet the world. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I can," he said softly. The words felt small, almost inadequate for what he felt inside. He moved closer to the piano, his hands hovering above the keys for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady himself. The musicians around him watched silently, some leaning forward, others whispering instructions to each other. The hall seemed to hold its breath with him, as if aware that something important was about to happen. Every step, every movement was magnified by the anticipation in the air. He began with a simple introduction, letting his fingers find their place naturally. The first notes were soft, tentative, as if testing the waters, making sure he was ready. But soon confidence grew with each chord. His hands remembered every lesson, every practice session, every moment he had spent imagining this exact scenario. The music was not just notes. It was his story, his life, and his determination poured into sound. The conductor gave him a subtle nod, a silent encouragement to continue, and he let himself be carried by the flow. The piece grew more complex as he progressed, his fingers flying across the keys with precision and grace. He had spent years mastering the mechanics, but now it was about expression, about emotion. Each chord told a story of struggle, of dreams deferred, of the long hours spent in silence. The music was alive, and he could feel the vibrations in his chest, in his soul, as if the piano itself was acknowledging his presence, responding to the passion he had kept hidden for so long. Around him, the musicians were captivated. The violinist paused mid-rehearsal, her bow hovering above the strings, eyes fixed on the young man. The cellist leaned closer, listening intently, as though trying to understand the depth of feeling in every note. The hall, usually filled with rehearsed perfection and predictable performances, now held a raw, unfiltered energy that no one had expected. The music flowed naturally, not constrained by formality or expectation, and it was powerful in its authenticity. He moved into the faster section, a complex part he had practiced countless times alone. His fingers were steady, precise, yet each note carried a sense of urgency and excitement. He could hear the reactions around him, faint gasps, soft murmurs, and it fueled him. Every key he pressed was deliberate yet free, a balance of control and emotion. The conductor and musicians exchanged glances, clearly impressed, but none interrupted. They sensed that this moment was something special, something unplanned but undeniable. A memory flashed across his mind. A time he had played on a broken piano in a dusty room, imagining an audience that never existed. He had played to empty walls, to silence, yet the music had never felt meaningless. It had always been enough for him, enough to express what he could not say. And now, here on this grand stage, that same music had an audience, real and attentive. The feeling was overwhelming, a mix of humility and triumph that made him press on even harder, pouring every ounce of energy and emotion into the performance. The hall seemed to respond to him, every note resonating off the walls, echoing through the air with clarity. The acoustics amplified the emotion, making the music feel even more alive. He could feel the energy of the space, the weight of the audience yet to arrive, the anticipation of the musicians. It was as if the stage itself had been waiting for this moment, for him to claim it, to show the world what he had always carried inside. The piano was no longer an instrument. It was an extension of him, a voice he had always wished to be heard. Time became irrelevant. He lost himself in the music, his fingers moving instinctively, his mind focused entirely on the flow of sound. The dynamics shifted naturally, rising and falling, fast and slow, soft and loud, each change reflecting his emotions. The musicians around him could only watch, adapting instinctively to the rhythm, blending their presence with his performance without taking over. The hall had become a living entity, breathing with him, reacting to every movement, every note. At one point he faltered slightly, a note slipping, a minor error that would have seemed disastrous in a rehearsed setting. But instead of stopping, he adjusted seamlessly, weaving the mistake into the melody, transforming it into something new and unexpected. The moment reminded him of all the times he had faced obstacles in life, moments when things did not go as planned, yet perseverance and creativity allowed him to continue. The music was no longer just a performance. It was a metaphor for his journey, a declaration that he could overcome, that he belonged. As the piece reached its climax, he felt the culmination of years of practice, patience, and silent dedication. Every note was infused with his personal story, his struggles, his dreams, and his unwavering commitment to his craft. The faster passages tested his skill, yet his fingers moved with grace and accuracy, each key struck with intention and passion. He could hear the subtle sounds of admiration around him, the way the musicians leaned forward, the slight intake of breath from those watching. It was a validation he had never sought but always needed, a recognition that his talent was real and undeniable. Finally, the music began to slow, transitioning into a soft, reflective conclusion. His hands rested lightly on the keys, letting each note linger, creating a sense of closure and release. The hall fell into a quiet reverence, the echo of the final chord hanging in the air like a whisper. The conductor stepped forward, breaking the silence with a smile of genuine admiration. The musicians around him exchanged looks of astonishment, silently acknowledging the extraordinary performance they had just witnessed. And for the first time, he allowed himself to breathe fully, to feel the weight of the moment sink in. The young man looked around the hall, taking in the faces of those who had watched him, even briefly. He felt a connection, a shared understanding that transcended words. The music had spoken for him, revealing the depth of his passion and the years of dedication that had gone unnoticed. He had taken a risk, stepped out of the shadows, and in doing so had claimed a space that had always belonged to him, even if he had not realized it. He rose slowly from the piano, his hands still tingling from the touch of the keys. The conductor approached, extending a hand in acknowledgement, and the young man accepted, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and anticipation. This moment was a turning point, a shift from invisibility to recognition, from silent practice to public acknowledgement. The stage, once merely a place to clean, had become a platform for his talent, a bridge to a future he had only imagined. As he stepped back, letting the piano remain under his hand's lingering warmth, he understood that this was only the beginning. The performance had been a challenge, a test of skill and courage, and he had met it. The music had carried him, and he had responded with authenticity and heart. The experience left him exhilarated and humbled, aware that the journey ahead would require continued dedication, but confident in his ability to rise to the challenge. He had faced the stage, faced the musicians, and faced himself, and he had emerged transformed, ready for whatever came next. The young man sat at the grand piano, feeling the polished keys beneath his fingers. The hall was alive with anticipation now. Musicians had stopped their practice entirely, some standing quietly to watch, others leaning over railings, whispering in disbelief. A few early audience members had entered, drawn by the music they had heard earlier. They moved slowly to their seats, careful not to interrupt the rare moment unfolding before them. The young man took a deep breath, steadying himself, and then let his hands glide across the keys. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant, as if testing the hall, the audience, and himself. But soon, confidence built with each chord, and he allowed the music to flow freely. He had spent countless hours practicing alone, imagining performances like this, dreaming of what it would feel like to have people listening, even briefly. Now the piano responded, and the hall carried the sound perfectly, making the music feel alive. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm guide him, letting the emotion pour through each note. The melody began to grow, swelling with passion and intensity. He played not only with skill but with every ounce of feeling he had kept inside for years. The notes expressed longing, hope, struggle, and triumph, telling a story without words. Every movement of his fingers was precise, yet natural, as if the piano and he had become one. The conductor watched closely, nodding subtly, allowing the young man to lead the moment entirely. The other musicians observed quietly, captivated by the unexpected brilliance in front of them. He moved into a complex passage, the keys demanding speed and accuracy. His hands flew over the piano with grace, each note resonating with power and emotion. He had imagined this moment countless times, but now it was real. The hall was filled with a pure, raw energy that was impossible to ignore. Some audience members leaned forward, eyes wide, feeling the music in their hearts. Even the shadows seemed to lean closer, drawn by the intensity of the performance. The music shifted, softer and more reflective, revealing vulnerability and depth. He played slowly, each note hanging in the air, allowing the audience to absorb the emotion. He thought of the long nights of practice, the times when no one noticed his dedication, the hours spent imagining applause that never came. Every chord was infused with that history, that struggle, that dream. And now, for the first time, someone was listening, truly listening. His hands moved with intention, telling a story that words could never capture. The piece gained momentum again, faster now, brighter, more dramatic. He let himself be carried by the music, each note flowing seamlessly into the next. The piano spoke for him, expressing excitement, determination, and joy. He remembered every moment of preparation, every challenge he had faced, and he poured it all into the performance. The musicians around him began to unconsciously blend in, their presence adding subtle depth, but he remained the center, commanding attention not through force, but through sheer talent and passion. The audience could not look away. The energy in the hall was electric. Every crescendo made hearts race. Every soft section drew tears or quiet awe. The young man's eyes remained closed most of the time, his focus entirely on the music. He had entered a world where nothing else existed, where only the piano, the notes, and the emotions mattered. The hall, the listeners, and the musicians were all part of the same rhythm, all connected through the sound he created. As the performance reached its peak, he played with unmatched intensity. His fingers danced across the keys, precise yet flowing, powerful yet tender. He felt every vibration, every resonance, and responded instinctively. The hall seemed to hold its breath, wrapped in the magic of the music. He had never felt so alive, so seen, so fulfilled. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice, a vessel carrying years of hidden talent and untold stories. He had finally found a way to share everything he carried inside. He transitioned into a slow, melancholic section, letting each note linger. The contrast between fast and slow passages highlighted the depth of his expression. Every chord was deliberate, every pause meaningful. The audience was captivated, moved by the raw honesty in his playing. There was no pretense, no attempt to impress artificially. He played because he had to, because the music demanded it, and because he could no longer keep it inside. His emotions flowed freely, making every person listening feel the story he had lived in silence for so long. A few of the musicians began to quietly accompany him, adding gentle layers without overpowering. Their involvement was instinctive, a recognition of his mastery and presence. The young man welcomed it, letting it enhance the performance without disrupting his vision. Together, they created a harmony that felt spontaneous yet intentional, powerful yet tender. The hall vibrated with the collective energy, the sound echoing through every corner, filling the space with life and beauty. He played the final section with a mix of strength and grace. The notes rose and fell like waves, carrying both exhilaration and relief. Every emotion he had felt throughout his life, the moments of doubt, the hours of practice, the longing to be recognized, was embedded in the music. The crescendo built to an almost unbearable height, then gently eased into a soft, lingering finish. He allowed the last note to fade slowly, letting it resonate in the hall and in the hearts of everyone present. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was full, heavy with emotion and awe. The young man lifted his hands from the keys, feeling the vibrations still echoing through him. His chest heaved with breath he had been holding unconsciously, and a wave of satisfaction and relief washed over him. The conductor approached slowly, a smile spreading across his face, eyes shining with admiration. The musicians around him whispered in awe, nodding and exchanging looks of amazement. The audience remained silent for a heartbeat, stunned by the depth and beauty of what they had witnessed, before the first round of applause began. The applause grew louder and louder, filling the hall, echoing off the walls. The young man stood, slightly trembling, overwhelmed by the reaction. He had played for himself, for years imagining a moment like this, and now it had arrived. People were seeing him, acknowledging his talent, celebrating the music that had lived inside him for so long. Tears threatened to fall, but he smiled, humbled and proud at the same time. This was more than a performance. It was a validation of every sacrifice, every quiet hour spent practicing, every moment of belief in himself when no one else noticed. As the audience continued to applaud, he took a small bow, acknowledging the support and appreciation. The conductor shook his hand warmly, and the musicians approached, offering congratulations and words of admiration. He felt a sense of connection, not only to the music but to the people around him, to the shared experience they had just witnessed. The piano had become a bridge, linking him to the world in a way he had never known possible. He stepped back from the piano, letting the keys rest beneath his hands' lingering warmth. The hall had returned to normal, yet it felt different now, alive with the memory of the performance. He understood that he had done something extraordinary, not for fame, not for recognition, but because it was who he was, because it was the only way to express the life he had lived and the dreams he carried. He had transformed a quiet moment into something unforgettable, and the experience would remain with him forever. The young man walked off the stage slowly, still feeling the echo of the music in his mind. He passed the chairs and instruments, the stage lights casting gentle shadows, and he realized that this was a turning point. He had faced his fears, shared his talent, and found a place in the world he had longed for. The performance had been a test, a challenge, and he had met it fully, with courage, skill, and heart. The memory of every note, every emotion, every connection he had made would remain with him, shaping the next steps of his journey. The applause had not stopped. The young man stood on the stage, his chest heaving, trying to absorb the overwhelming reaction. He had never imagined this moment in his life. All those years of silent practice, of hidden talent, had led to this instant, and now the world was finally seeing him. People were approaching, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles of pure admiration. The musicians who had once looked past him now shook his hand, clapped him on the shoulder, and offered words of respect that felt almost surreal. He stepped away from the piano, still feeling the lingering vibrations of the final notes in his hands and chest. The conductor walked up, a warm expression on his face, and spoke with genuine enthusiasm. "You have a gift," he said simply. "A rare gift. Have you ever considered performing formally?" The question struck him deeply. He had always dreamed of this, but never dared to imagine it could actually happen. Now, standing there with the hall full of admiration, he realized that his life could change forever. Other people approached as well. Patrons, teachers, and even young musicians who had been observing the rehearsal timidly now gathered around, eager to connect. They asked questions, praised his technique, and marveled at the emotion he could convey through the piano. He listened, polite and humble, yet inside, he felt a spark of joy he had never experienced. For the first time, he understood that his talent was not just for him. It could touch others, inspire them, and open doors he had never dared to approach. He walked around the stage, letting his eyes take in the grandeur of the hall from a new perspective. He had been cleaning the stage countless times, pushing a broom, wiping dust, noticing every crack and polish, and yet he had never realized how close he had been to this world. Now, standing here as a performer, he could feel the energy of the room differently. The lights, the seats, the instruments, it was all part of something larger, something he could be a part of. And that realization filled him with a quiet determination. This was just the beginning. As people continued to approach, offering congratulations and opportunities, he thought of the long nights of practice, the empty rooms where no one listened, the piano that had been his only companion. All that had led to this moment. And yet, he felt that humility must remain. Talent alone was not enough. He had to continue learning, improving, and sharing. He remembered the first time he touched a piano, the joy it had brought him, and the passion it had sparked. That passion was still alive, stronger than ever, and it would guide him forward. He took a moment to look at the grand piano once more. Its polished surface reflected the stage lights, and the memory of playing the first notes, the hesitant introduction that grew into an unforgettable performance, lingered. He realized that the piano had been more than an instrument. It had been a companion, a teacher, a voice that had carried his story. The hall, the audience, the musicians, they were all witnesses to a journey that had been quiet, hidden, and patient. And now it was acknowledged. Opportunities began to present themselves almost immediately. Invitations to perform formally, to join ensembles, to teach and share his talent were extended. The young man listened carefully, grateful but measured, understanding that every choice would shape the next steps of his life. He knew that recognition could be fleeting if not nurtured, and that humility and dedication would always be his foundation. Yet, the excitement of possibility filled him with hope. For the first time, the dream he had nurtured silently was becoming reality. He also noticed something unexpected, a change within himself. The quiet confidence he had longed for, the courage to step forward, was now real. He had faced his fears, shared his talent, and been acknowledged. That experience gave him strength, a belief that he could take on challenges that once seemed impossible. He understood now that recognition was not just about applause. It was about realizing his own value, trusting in his abilities, and embracing the opportunities life presented. Even as the hall emptied slowly, the memory of the performance lingered. The young man stayed for a while, walking among the instruments and chairs, thinking about everything that had happened. The stage, once a place of routine work, had transformed into a space of possibility. He could almost hear the echoes of his music still resonating, not just in the walls, but in his heart. Each note had been a step forward, each chord a declaration that he belonged. And in that realization he found peace and inspiration. Later, as he left the hall, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The long hours of silent practice, the persistence in the face of invisibility, the moments of doubt, all of it had been necessary. Every obstacle had prepared him for the opportunity he had seized. He realized that talent alone was not enough. It was perseverance, patience, and unwavering belief in oneself that allowed a hidden gift to shine. And he vowed to continue, to keep practicing, to keep sharing, and to never forget the journey that had begun with cleaning a stage. He walked home slowly, the cool evening air brushing against his face. The city lights reflected softly on the streets, and he felt a sense of connection to the world around him. He understood that life could change in a single moment, that opportunity often arrived unexpectedly, and that being ready was essential. He had been ready, he had been prepared, and that had made all the difference. The memory of the performance, the applause, the acknowledgement, these would guide him in the days and years to come. At home, he sat quietly for a while, letting the events of the evening sink in. He recalled the first time he had ever played the piano, the hours spent alone in dim rooms, imagining the audience he now had. He thought of all the people who had never believed in him, who had overlooked his potential. He did not feel anger or bitterness. Instead, he felt gratitude. The challenges had shaped him, the silence had strengthened him, and the dreams had sustained him. Now, finally, the world had seen what he had always known. His talent was real and it had power. In the following days, life began to change in small but significant ways. People reached out to him, offering guidance, mentorship, and opportunities to perform. He accepted some, declined others, always careful to remain true to himself. Each step was deliberate, thoughtful, grounded in the understanding that the journey mattered as much as the destination. He had learned that recognition was not an endpoint but a beginning, a chance to expand, to grow, and to continue sharing the music that had always defined him. He continued practicing, refining his skills, and exploring new compositions. The piano became not just a tool, but a partner in creativity and self-expression. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new joys. He remained humble, remembering the stage he had cleaned, the years of unnoticed work, and the moments of quiet determination that had led to this transformation. The music continued to be his voice, his guide, and his connection to the world. The young man also found inspiration in the reactions of those who had witnessed his performance. He saw how music could move people, how passion could resonate beyond words. That realization strengthened his commitment to share his talent widely, to inspire others who might feel unseen or overlooked. He knew that every note played had the potential to touch hearts, and he embraced that responsibility with gratitude and humility. As weeks turned into months, his reputation grew. Invitations to perform in concerts, festivals, and teaching opportunities became more frequent. Yet, he remained grounded, always remembering the journey that had begun with cleaning a stage, with silent practice, with a quiet dream. The transformation was not just in recognition, but in his understanding of himself, his purpose, and the power of perseverance. Eventually, he became known not only for his skill but for his humility, his dedication, and his ability to inspire others. He shared his story freely, speaking of the long hours of practice, the moments of doubt, and the courage to step forward when opportunity arose. People admired not only his talent but his journey, the authenticity of his experience, and the message that anyone, from any background, could achieve greatness with passion, patience, and persistence. In the end, the young man realized that the performance was only the beginning. Life had opened new doors, but the core of his journey remained the same: music, dedication, and belief in himself. The stage he had cleaned countless times now symbolized more than a task. It represented opportunity, readiness, and transformation. He had been seen, acknowledged, and celebrated, but he had also discovered something far more valuable: the strength and courage within himself to continue creating, performing, and inspiring. And that realization would guide him for the rest of his life.